He lives by a motto that we can all hope to live by. It is you live once, but you get to serve twice. It is Dan Faber. He is Chief Executive Officer of the International Tennis Hall of Fame. You can see part of that behind him. It is a beautiful place, rich in tradition and storytelling. And Dan is a key piece to what they do there as its CEO. And we're going to tell his story on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley. And this is a sports media, tennis media podcast conversation where we not only share the business side of my guest, but also the personal side. And I do tennis commentary at the ATP Challenger level and at the college tennis level and some WTA as well. And Dan, as we get into your story and have you on, it's going to be a really fun conversation. So I'm glad that you have time, and I guarantee you we're going to have fun.
Well, Brian, first of all, thank you for having me on this show. And I really do enjoy talking about the International Tennis Hall of Fame. And so, any chance I get that opportunity, I appreciate it. So, as I said, thank you so much for having me on your show. Look forward to it.
By the way, how good is that second serve of yours?
It's interesting. You led with the quote. You live once, but you get to serve twice. I actually grabbed that when I was in Australia this year, and it just kind of resonated with me big time because it does kind of connect to life and then just how my life is connected to tennis now. And but I will say my second serve has gotten a lot better because it has to be better because my first serve is horrible. So I have to have that second serve. I always have to have that second chance within any game that I'm playing. And so it's got a little better actually. And I'm lucky. I've got some phenomenal pros up here in Newport that continually work on that for me.
So if I'm serve receiving against you and you're, say, competing in college, and there comes that second serve and I'm in the deuce court, what am I anticipating from you? Are you going to go backhand? Are you going to go forehand? Are you going to go body? What are we talking about here?
My return to serve.
Or no,
Well,
your serve to me. Yeah. So you
oh, I
serve
serve to you.
yeah, your
No,
second serve to me.
I'm gonna probably go a little bit more wide with a little kick if I can. Just kind of push you off the court as best as I can. At least that's what the pros have been working on with me a little bit. So that would probably be my go-to, a little wide.
From second serves to someone like yourself who loves to serve in others in giving back as we transition from the second serve to serving in general, you have been a lifelong educator. The thrill you get, how gratifying it is to be able to be in a position to advocate for the sport. How much pride do you take in that, in being able to go on the front lines and bestow a passion and a love of sport to others and serve in that way?
Yeah, listen, I come from a family of giving back. My mom was a teacher, but she was also a social worker, and I just kind of grew up in a household that you always kind of pay it forward, you give back. So it's kind of been instilled with me. So I did start my career as an educator myself, wanting to make a difference in the lives of youth. Um, but I also had a passion for the sport of tennis and just all sports. I'm pretty lucky. I'm pretty lucky that I have found a path, a career path where both of those come together. And they have been since I've graduated from college. So I've been able to use my educational background in a classroom, but now out of a classroom and combine that with the sport of tennis pretty much my entire career. So I pinch myself, I'm pretty fortunate and lucky that I'm doing something that I love. I actually get paid to do it. But more importantly, I'm using the sport and I'm using education to change lives. I'm making a difference, I think, in communities. And then I had an opportunity to do that at the national level when I was running the USTA Foundation. And now I have the same chance to do this at a global level, working for the International Tennis Hall of Fame. So, do I have a lot of pride in it? Absolutely. I go 110% on pretty much everything I do. And now that it's with tennis and education again, it's pretty special.
You've changed a lot of lives, what you're doing with tennis and its outreach. How has tennis changed your life, even from a very young age, your upbringing?
Tennis has been a part of my life almost as a secondary sport when I was 10, starting at 10. Um, Full transparency, I grew up in Michigan, so I tend to play contact sports, football and wrestling and those kinds of things. And unfortunately, but I say now, fortunately, I actually broke my back playing football going into high school. And so that kind of then forced me to go to my secondary sports, which happened to be tennis and golf. You know, my generation, we did multi-sports to begin with. So it was pretty easy then after I was healed to just kind of focus more so just on tennis now because it was less contact. And that then allowed me to kind of just take it to another level. I was never a tour player, never would have been, but I played Division III college. Um, Obviously played in my high school prior to that after my back healed. But it's kind of kept me going in life because when I did break my back, I wasn't sure if I'd ever play any sport again. And that sport was allowing me to just kind of remain social, use it as a tool to keep myself active. And now it's become my career. And I never thought that it would be. I thought maybe at some point in my life I'd be more on a football field or something like that. And now I find myself not just on a tennis court, but I'm using the sport, as you just said, Brian, to change lives.
If you were to reincarnate and be a coach or be on a football field, what would that second life? Obviously, tennis comes first for you, but that second life, what would you foresee for yourself when it comes to football per se?
You mean if it was something other than tennis
Something
or?
other than tennis.
That would be that's an interesting question. Sometimes I don't even know it's necessarily because it's tennis. I just have valued athletics my entire life. I have an older brother, an older sister who are very, very good athletes in different types of sports. My father was a phenomenal athlete. In fact, he had a chance to possibly go play in the minor league baseball. So sports has always been a kind of a part of my life, just like I said, education was or giving back. And so to me, it was just, I just know I have to have some kind of athletic piece in my life. So it could be a different sport. But there's a value to every sport that you play. And what I think, though, is so unique about tennis versus any other sport, it can equate off the court in so many different ways, right, of life. Using that from a business perspective, using it from a social perspective. So when you ask me what would my second life be or what would that sport be, I'm not quite sure what I mean. I love golf, so maybe I guess I would choose golf, but I'd probably just apply it in the same way. Like, I think people know me for taking advantage of situations and bringing it together and then enhancing my own life, but also those around me. And, like I said, I've been pretty fortunate in the opportunities that I've had using a sport, combining that to education.
The sport background, the sporting background that you have, also I feel that you've always valued that. You mentioned your family and how it's always been a part of your life, sports. There's also the notion that competition runs in your veins from whether it was football, whether it was wrestling, as you're talking about, and tennis and playing in college. How have you, over the course of your life, run towards competition, savored it, or likened it to something that you're fond of from playing, but also now in your role where you get to sort of deploy the love of competition and what that might look like in your life today?
Maybe I'm a little too competitive, Brian, but
Oh,
according to my wife sometimes, but I actually thrive on competition. Both playing sports, but I also know my limits, and but I love to try to compete up at the level that I'm at. I love playing somebody who's better than me in any kind of sport that I play, but that also equates off the tennis court as well. I challenge myself on a daily basis. And, anybody who has worked with me or who knows me well enough, I've kind of created three acronyms that represent my style, my brand. And I kind of carry that over in work and in life. And the first one is always ABC, which I didn't create, but it's always be closing. Take every opportunity, push yourself. How best can you close an opportunity or find something new to bring into it? The second one is ABL, always be learning. And so that everyone knows, like, any opportunity you have a chance to learn from someone else or the situation or how you can even better yourself to be, enhance what you're trying to do. That's the ABL. And then the third one, which is to me is just as important, no matter what you're doing in life, is ABN. Just always be nice. Strive to be nice. It's not easy when you're in competition and you're competing or you're competing against, other market, situations or organizations, or you're competing with someone on the court. You see people who lose their cool. That's when you're really tested is like, how do you control that frustration? How do you control that reaction and just try to always be nice and then apply that so that then you're truly at that ABC moment, closing opportunities.
I like what you said as well about the ABL always be learning. And I'm wondering how that applies to what you're constantly learning from your wife.
Well, listen, I'm going to put it with my wife and my daughter. It's two against one in my household. We have just one little fantastic daughter who's now 24. But I'm constantly trying to, garner opportunities in terms of changing my own personal behavior through my wife and my daughter. And so, we've got a really strong bond, the three of us, and I think we do that collectively together. And so we're a little bit more open to each other's feedback. Maybe some of that is timing when you try to give feedback to someone in your life like that. But no, my wife has been super supportive of my career. She knew after about the 12th year of teaching in a classroom, I was starting to get a little burned out. And she just said to me, you just got to try something different. So it was her who kind of encouraged me to like challenge yourself, do something differently. And that's when I kind of saw this avenue that maybe through my opportunities I've had with tennis, how could I apply that in other ways? And so from the beginning, she's been supportive. And, then when I got an opportunity to go to the national level at the USA Foundation, that involved a lot of traveling. And fortunately for us, my wife worked from home, so she could always be there to get my daughter to school and pick her up from school. And we were extremely happy and as I said, fortunate about that. So, but she embraced that I could go out and do that to help build this career. And now I'm at this global level, and I'm not quite sure if she knew that then I'd be flying to Australia and I'd be flying to Paris and London. But now my daughter's a little older, and so my hope is, besides the fact we have three very old dogs, she can start joining me because she put a lot of support and effort into allowing me to grow within this industry. And so my hope is that now she can start enjoying it with me.
When she starts enjoying it with you and you're traveling, what do you want her to see that you see during these trips?
You know, I do my best not to kind of control or tell anybody what they should, I always, I kind of laughed. You just said that. I always say to my daughter, sometimes in life it's 90% perception and 10% reality. And you have to understand that you have to try to make sure that the 90% perception piece becomes more factual, and you can't really control someone if they're not viewing something the way you want it to be and so forth. So, going back to if my wife is with me, she has a perception of, what I'm doing when I'm out there, what I'm trying to do. I think that will then help go to that 10% reality. She's going to see like, I'm not going to these fancy places and touring around these cities. And, many times people, and she would say, you're so lucky. You get to see the world, you get to see the country. And I kind of smile and I'm like, you don't understand. I don't really see these places. I go from the hotel to the venue and the venue back to the hotel. And if I'm fortunate enough, I go to dinner and I try to pick something culturally relevant to wherever I am in the world. So I think she has now witnessed that. She realizes that her husband's just not out there, just ripping it up and having fun in games. He's actually working his ass off, and he's not necessarily, going anywhere from. He's just going from the hotel to the venue and just entertaining to try to continue to move the mission forward of the organization that I'm with.
So you've shown her that you've changed a lot, and for her to see that, what is that like to see how you've changed over the years in such a cool way?
Who knows if she's going to listen to this show, but I don't think she even realized it. It was honestly, Brian, it was just a couple weeks ago, and we were out with other people, and somebody said the same thing, like, "Man, you've got the coolest job, and you get to meet people, and they're not wrong. I mean, I do have a great job, and I do meet people that are on most people's bucket list. And I just, I never take that for granted. But at the same time, she made a comment. She said, it is pretty astounding, Dan, um, how you've gone from teaching fourth grade and to where you now are as the CEO of a International Hall of Fame. Um, that meant a lot to me, So if she does listen to this, I want her to know, that kind of sunk deep quickly in me. And I really appreciated her giving that type of compliment, and it was in front of some of our greatest friends.
She would appreciate, I think, listening to this conversation because we're painting such a great picture of her. And I don't know if you thought going into this conversation, Dan, we were going to go there, but
Dude,
that
I
that
didn't know
is
we'd go there,
that,
Brian. It is
that's what I
coming.
love.
It is gonna be Valentine's Day coming up. I'm not sure when you're airing this, but Valentine's Day is Friday. So maybe we should air this on Friday.
I think you're absolutely right. I think this is part of your gift to her in doing that. And what a cool thing, because you mentioned just how she metaphorically lit a fire within you from when you were a young professional and figuring yourself out in the world. I feel like there's nothing more important to get to somebody's potential than to have that key support system like your wife, and to see how far you've come and to see the amount of impact that you've had, and then to get her validation. I can't imagine how priceless that has to be. I also can't imagine with how busy your schedule, it allows you to reflect because of going places and seeing people and traveling on the go and all the responsibilities you have at the International Tennis Hall of Fame in terms of different events and tournaments and storytelling. How often do you, if any, do you get to reflect on this journey of yours that we've been talking about?
Well, I mentioned to you the three acronyms that I kind of now live by, which is that ABC, ABL, ABN. The ABL is very important. They always be learning, and part of learning is reflecting. And you do have to take the time. I do my best after every single event. I mean, my teams over the year and my new team here, and I love satisfactory surveys. How did we do? What could we do differently? But even at a personal level, I try to pretty much every evening when I'm winding down to just think through how the day went. And for my own self, like, could I have done something differently? Sometimes that eats at you a little bit, and then you can't go to sleep that night. So I try to control it as much as possible, but reflection's important. And you have to be able to reflect. You have to be able to put a mirror up, actually, and just say to yourself, did I handle that correctly? Did I not do that well? And how could I have done it differently? And so it is part of my ABL domain there, is that you should be reflecting. And I do a lot of that. And maybe that's my educational background too, because when I was a teacher, I spent a lot of time working with kids and just making sure they learn from mistakes. You learn more from mistakes than you do from wins. And so that's just kind of been part of my life for quite some time.
When you have tennis lovers walk the premises of the International Tennis Hall of Fame, there's a lot of learning that can be done. As somebody like yourself who loves to educate, loves to learn, loves to share stories, and loves to talk about history and loves to connect with people, what impression do you want to leave on people when they go there and they see the vast history of tennis and what you can show at your venue and what that looks like?
Well, let me just use my own personal example to kind of lead into this answer. When I was trying to make the decision 18 months ago if I should take this role as the CEO, I said to my wife, we need to go to Newport and just obviously experience the city, which is unbelievable. If you haven't been to Newport, that in itself is just amazing and epic. But I really just want to immerse myself without anyone knowing. At the time, I didn't think anyone knew I was here, but then I found out later the entire staff knew I was here. So my wife and I, we went to Newport and I put on like a hoodie and we walked around the grounds, which is behind me, and there's 7+ acres of this incredible establishment. And we went into the museum, Brian. And if you have not gone to the museum, whoever's listening to this, it's a life-changing experience. And you don't even have to be a tennis player to feel the inspiration that comes out of this museum behind me. And we're renovating it right now. And so you're going to now get to see a new piece of what this museum is going to even become to be more relevant, which will be finished in May of this year. But walking through that museum where we actually took 3 hours. By the time we walked out of there, my wife beat me to the statement to say, how can you not take this job? And I just looked at her and I said, this nailed it. The environment that the Hall of Fame has, it just yells out inspiration. It just gives you this sense of being ultimate because it is. It's the ultimate honor in the sport of tennis globally. I mean, think about that. It is not easy to get into the Tennis Hall of Fame. And this is the only place that is the keeper of the global sport. Yes, other federations, other tournaments have their incredible museums and they have history there. But right here behind me is what keeps the global sport of all the different, you know, times in tennis and the history. And, being an educator, seeing how tennis compared to most sports has changed society, it's just amazing, right? All the way back from Althea Gibson and Arthur Ashe, and then you see what the Billie Jean King of equal prize money, which changed that for all sports, and you just keep going in time, and then how attire has changed, the way people dressed and so forth over time. It would, from the Chrissy Everetts to the Serena Williams, and it just keeps going and going. The sport has changed society in many different ways, and so that's what people will experience when they come here. They'll just go to like back in time. And by the way, we have one of the first court tennis, real tennis that started in France that people don't understand is on this campus too. So you go into that building and you realize like that's the start of tennis. And then behind me is one of the first tennis courts in America where the US Open, which was the National Tennis Championships, started. So everyone knows where the US Open is now. It actually started here at the Hall of Fame. So think of that history. So that was a long-winded way of saying when somebody comes to the International Tennis Hall of Fame, they will leave just inspired. And they will want to probably pick up a tennis racket if they haven't. But if they have, they're going to want to continue to play it and have a passion for it in another way. And then, as I said, Newport is such a destination anywhere around the world to come to Newport. Have you been here, Brian?
So this is funny. This is neat. My sister got married in, of all places, in Newport, Rhode Island. There is this, and you know the area better than anybody. There is this lighthouse from where
Yeah.
you are at the International Tennis Hall. I would say it's about a mile or 2 miles, and you can look out in the bay. And this we had she got married in 2018. We got to look out in the bay and see, and this was in the fall. I mean, we're talking about right before it gets cold, that beautiful time, the changing of the seasons. And I kid you not, Dan, we were staying at this hotel, and I'm like, I am in Newport. I know I'm here for my sister's wedding, but I got to walk to the International Tennis Hall of Fame. And I think it was raining that day. I don't think it was open, but I did get to sort of walk around the outside because I wanted to at least see something about it. And I thought to myself, how cool it would be to eventually go in there and be able to be exposed to so much that a sport that cares so much about its history, it has to be, Dan, of an the love of history. And you brought up a really good point. The love of how tennis has been on the front lines of societal change too. To put that into perspective, it must add on to the value and the responsibility and the thrill that you have as sort
Yeah.
of the CEO of the ITHF.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think you probably described it a lot better than I just did and put it in a nice bundle there. It is a thrill, and it is a sport that is just, in my mind, so special and unique. I mean, the sport of tennis is in every continent, most countries. It touches every age level, every gender, every culture. I mean, not too many sports do that. And so my role, I feel like I have an obligation to take that history, to take what the sport represents, and do my best in order to inspire generations around the world um, through the mission of the International Tennis Hall of Fame. And, one of the things I'm really, really excited about is we created this new global youth initiative called Be Legendary, which is precisely taking the attributes that you just highlighted with me. Let's take the lessons that tennis has provided and societal changes that it's been represented by, and then use our Hall of Famers and some of the legends of the game to help deliver this that will then inspire that next generation. And it's called Be Legendary. We all have our own legendary moments. We all have greatness. You have an inner greatness. I have an inner greatness. That's the educational mindset in me. So how do we use the history of the game, the lessons that came from it, the values that are represented from tennis, right? Gratitude, resiliency, teamwork, all of those different things. And every Hall of Famer kind of has their own brand in that way. And so we combine all of this together. We're partnering with any youth tennis program out there that would like to work with us, as long as it fits within our strategic plan from a budget standpoint, because it's free. We're offering it free. We raise the money from a charitable perspective, and then we offer this program for free. We launched it in Melbourne with Tennis Australia, the Australian Open. And, we had Ash Barty, who's not a Hall of Famer yet, but one will argue she probably will be.
Definitely.
And then we had Leighton Hewitt, because we want to use Hall of Famers from those countries that they reside. And we used the history, and we worked with some of their best 10-year-olds, and it was super inspiring, Brian. And then we took that to the Dallas Open, and we're going to now go to Palm Springs and Indian Wells, and then we'll find ourselves going back globally to London, and it's just taken off.
You know what I find amazing as you're saying that, Dan, is that, and you've seen this more than anybody, I would have to imagine, with all of the legends of the sport, the current top players that you get to talk with, or those who have retired, the Ash Bardys and the contingent like that. Is there a sport where the athlete, the top athlete, cares as much about the history of the sport and takes so much pride in the history of the sport that is tennis? Now, I might be biased. You and I, we love tennis. We might be biased, but just for an example, and this is not, I mean, guys like and gals like Novak Djokovic, the history of the sport and how important it is for him to know the predecessors. Why do you think, amongst all the sports, that the current greats and the past greats, it just seems like they flock more to the history and they care about it more? I might be biased than other sports, but in tennis, it really does stand out. Whereas there is this inner responsibility from the greats of today to carry on a tradition.
Yeah, listen, I'm like you. I mean, I'm probably biased. Well, I am biased, what you just explained for the sport of tennis. But I will say, a lot of sports do have their own history and their own connectors from generation to generation. Um, what I did in my first 90 days is I try to contact as many Hall of Fames as possible in different sport categories as well as music and so forth. And just to kind of, again, go back to my ABL moment, to just kind of learn, like, what are they doing and what are their Hall of Famers? How are they staying connected? How do they remain relevant and how do they feel about supporting their Hall of Fames and so forth? And I learned a lot. I mean, I learned a tremendous, and some of it I have been applying to some of the business plans that I'm putting forward. But what I also have learned walking away from that is that the International Tennis Hall of Fame in the sport of tennis really is special. And as you just said, you know, we also host a really neat event in New York City during the US Open time period. We do it in Manhattan, and it's called the Legends Ball. And what we did last year is we brought in different generations of Hall of Famers to talk about how that person inspired them to do better and to get, and to go to the next level in tennis, and how that one then inspired the next one and the next one and the next one. And it was very clear to me that tennis players do respect their history. They do respect the players prior to them, and they want to emulate that. And they do take different things that those players have done and accomplished and to their benefit so that they can carry it on. It is a very special, unique sport. And I have seen that a lot in the sport of tennis, because when we ask certain ones to come to our events and say, would you speak to this? It's a no-brainer. They're ready to speak to who inspired them in the sport and so forth. So, you hear the Chrissy Everett's, the Bjorn Borgs, and the Andre Agassi's inspired the next generation, and the Andy Roddick's, and then and John McEnroe. Like, everybody kind of found their track of who inspired them moving forward. The Martinez. I mean, you could just name them all, and they all somehow know what changed their lives to keep them going in their own efforts.
In summation, I feel like a lot of those names inspired you and continue to. Coming to the International Tennis Hall of Fame is a great way to inspire, as we've been talking about. But I feel like as we wrap up this conversation, Dan, the key to this interview is the inspiration from your wife and how much that has played a part in your career and your life. And as someone who just got married, I hope you share this conversation with your wife. And I would also love to see that second serve kicker to the backhand. I'd love to be on the receiving end of that from you. And at some point that would be a fun back and forth on the tennis court. But Dan, I appreciate you so much. Dan Faber, Chief Executive Officer. I'm Bryan Fenley, tennis broadcaster with the ATP Challenger Tour, WTA, and college tennis. And this has been a real thrill. Real thrill, Dan. Thank you for being here.
Well, Bryan, like I said, thank you for having me on your show. And you're right. I did not expect some of the questioning, especially starting with my wife. So let's bundle this up and send it to her for Valentine's Day. That would be
Yes.
great. But any chance I have an opportunity to kind of share my own personal journey and how it connects to this sport of tennis, my hope is that maybe I can inspire somebody in the next generation to find their way also. And who knows, it could be on a tennis court, it could be in broadcasting, it could be a writer, it could be a Bryan, right? Fenley. So my hope is that whatever I'm doing and I'm saying, that I can also influence somebody moving forward. So thank you.